Let me tell you guys a story time of the ghost that causes accidents on a certain road in Limpopo. So I have this uncle of mine that is a truck driver, and he tells us ghost stories all the time. This one time he told me about, we were passing a certain road, and he told me to close my eyes because sometimes there's this ghost that just appears out of nowhere. And I asked him, like, aren't you scared? And he was like, as a truck driver, he protects himself and he knows how to speak with ghosts, you know. His mom was like a traditional healer, and we low-key think that lady was a witch. I'm not gonna hold you. Sorry, uncle. So I started to question him, whatever, what was he talking about, whatever. And he's like, there's a ghost that wears all white. It's a lady. And that lady causes accidents on this road. Whether it's night or day, it does not matter. So my uncle told me that this lady causes accidents during the day. She wears all white. And for one, there's a curve before you get to where she's standing. And obviously you're going to be speeding because you're not going to be thinking that there's somebody that's standing there because there's no houses there. So basically, after you curve, you see that lady, and if you choose to just continue speeding, you will probably survive. If you choose to slow down or try to go on the other side, you are going to crash, is what I was trying to say. And mind you, on this side, it's nothing but rock. On this side, there is that thing, man, I don't know what they call it, that keeps cars from running on the other side. Mind you, on that other side, it's very, very, like, deep to get to, it's very far to get to the bottom, and there's like water there, and then there's bushes, so like it's a scary place. And at night, apparently, she will act like she's standing next to the road, like she's hiking. If you don't pay any mind to her, she is going to enter your car. How, you don't know. And as soon as you look back and you get scared, she will go, you're doomed. So you obviously have to act like, okay, I see you in the back of my seat, I'm just going to continue driving like I don't see you. Say a little prayer in your heart, be smart about it, because the obviously this lady's end goal is nothing but distraction. So my uncle told me that he's seen her like quite a few times, and he's used to her at this point. Like whenever he drives up that curve, he does nothing but speed. If he finds her in his truck, he basically just looks at her and just continues moving, and she just disappears at a certain point when you're not looking. And so the reason for this lady doing this is that apparently she got unalived by somebody, and the person threw her there. And so obviously, because people cause destruction on her, she causes destruction on people. And another thing that you must know, she only targets men, no women, nada. If you have a woman in the car, she lets you go. If a woman is driving, you're not gonna see her, but men see her all the time. And what's crazy is that nobody knows who this lady is, so they can't inform her family to come and get her spirit or whatever. So she's gonna be there for a very long time. You guys are in trouble, eh?
Do you guys want to hear a paranormal story that's been living in my head rent-free for days? Okay, so this girl named Amy sent me an email, and she said that she's been different ever since she was a toddler. And her family noticed it before she even understood what was happening. She remembers being in the car with her grandmother and her mother, and they would be silently thinking something, and she would answer them out loud before they even spoke. She wasn't even 3 years old when this happened. Now, she also has memories of her before she was even born. She has a memory of her floating in a dark, quiet place with white, tiny lights around her, like she was waiting to enter this life. And as she grew, she started having flashes of what she believed was past lives. In one of these lives, she was a dark-haired woman with 3 children and a burly husband living in a cabin in the Victorian era. And in the second one, she was a very rich, spoiled, and vain woman. She believes that this life is karma for that one, because the life that she's experienced now, she has experienced a lot of pain and bad luck. The scariest thing she's ever experienced all trace back to one place, her great-grandparents' house. She said that as a kid, she always experienced a presence there that she couldn't explain, and it scared her. Now, her great-grandparents were complicated people, and the house had a long, heavy history. Now, it's important to note that they ran an old folks home out of it at one point, and there was always unsettling stories about how they handled it. Amy believes that this is why what I'm about to tell you occurred. So the basement of her great-grandparents' house was the part that nobody wanted anything to do with. There was a small room down there that the entire family avoided. It was cold. It was windowless. This was the only part of all the house that there were just dead spiders everywhere. Not like curled up dead spiders, just dead, like they looked like they were just laying there. Almost like they had crawled in there and just never crawled back out. The air felt heavy and unsettling, like something was down there. And they were right, because this part is just Oh my God. So she had an uncle, right? And her uncle stayed in that room one night back in the early 80s when he was young. Now she said she had no idea how anybody slept in that room, but he did. He fell asleep that night and he wakes up in the middle of the night because he feels this rapid tapping on top of the blanket. Not on him, just tap, 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 tap on top of his blanket, touching him. So he jumps up scared and he's looking around the room and finally his eyes adjust. And what he was looking at terrified him. It had light beige, wrinkly, slimy skin. Think of a rhinoceros mixed with a frog, she said, but it looked like it was in rigor. It had small, beady, yellow eyes set way too close together and an enormous, almost cartoonishly wide smile with pink gums and tons and tons of baby teeth. Tiny baby teeth, just rows and rows. It's tall and lanky and it didn't move. It didn't reach. It didn't do anything. It just sat there staring at him. Now this obviously terrified him to his core and he wouldn't go back in that room and he tried to move on from this, but something would happen when he was older that would change the trajectory of his life for a little bit. Her uncle really liked the outdoors and he liked hunting, but he didn't hunt for food. He hunted for sport. The woods just cleared his head. He loved it. Well, one night he has a dream and he's walking through the woods like always. Trees were quiet, the air is still, and a deer steps out into the clearing. Except for the deer is on two legs, and this deer looks at him with like this almost melancholic look, like it's filled with dread. Then the deer walks up to him, and then the deer did the same thing to him that he does to deers, and he snaps awake. Now, this dream scared her uncle so badly that, mixed with the experience that he had when he was younger in the early 80s, messed him up. He never hunted again, and it was his favorite thing to do. And unfortunately, he struggled for a little bit. He is better now, but this really got to his head. Now, when Amy was told these stories, she was shocked because in 2003, when she was 6 years old, she had a lot of trouble sleeping alone, and she had finally gotten to the point where she could sleep alone. So one night, she's laying in bed, and she has her little horsey blanket, and she has her little SpongeBob box TV that's glowing in the corner, and she falls asleep. Well, later on that night, she wakes up because she feels something tap, 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 rapidly on her arm. So she wakes up, and she's looking around the room, and that's when she sees it. The same exact thing her uncle saw, with the long curled arms and lanky legs, all the baby teeth and that frozen smile, except for she said that it had arms like a T-Rex curled like that and claws, and she said it was just staring at her like it was looking at her through a glass of a different reality. And the crazy thing is that after she saw this, she said that she didn't feel fear like a normal child would. She just felt like she was looking at something different. But then afterwards, she realized how terrifying this was, and right after this, her life just went completely downhill, almost like this thing had taken something away from her. She struggled a lot, just like her uncle, with many things. She's now okay and happy and in a better place, but she will never forget what happened to her or what happened to her uncle. So what did you guys think about that story?
I don't know if she was being abused, but I do know that she was murdered by her fiance, and not knowing if he'll be sent to jail for the rest of his life really isn't sitting right with me or her family. So this woman's name is Laura Cardanes. She's 51 years old, living in Ridgeway, Virginia with her fiance, Adam Hughes. Laura is a very hardworking woman who isn't the type to just slack off or skip work for no reason. So on October 25th, 2023, when she didn't show up to work for like 2 or 3 days in a row, her co-workers really started to worry. And so they decide to call the police, report her missing, and ask to do a wellness check, just to make sure that everything was all right. So the police head on over to Laura's house, where they see her fiance Adam at home just chilling. And not thinking anything of it, police ask him, hey, when's the last time you seen your fiance Laura? Her kids and co-workers are really worried for her. She's been MIA for like 2 days. And this creature that's currently taking up space responds with, oh yeah, actually it's so weird. I haven't seen her since like the 21st. That's like what, 4 days ago? What an odd thing to say. So you haven't seen your fiance in almost a week, yet the first person to call 911 was her coworker. Oh, okay. Anyways, police found that a bit odd, so they jot down his response, they go back to the police station, and they file a freaking warrant to search his property because there is no way that they're gonna let that slide. And so the next day, they arrive back to Adam and Laura's house with all of the officers ready to search the place, and sure enough, after a few hours of digging around, they find something. Inside of both their home and Adam's truck was human blood splattered all over, and these officers are thinking, oh no, we're dealing with something way worse than we thought. So they collect the blood samples and then they store it away for safekeeping, and then they start doing their digging on Laura and Adam's relationship. And boy, oh boy. It took a lot of digging for me to find this, so it almost feels like he didn't want us to know, but it turns out that back in December of 2022, Adam was being charged for some sort of domestic violence assault against Laura. But then all of a sudden, she took back her statement and the case just went cold. So my question is, did Adam force her to stay quiet? Because 1 year later, we've got a car and a house full of blood, a woman who's been missing for like 4 days, and a man who couldn't give two shits about reporting his fiance missing. So by this point, investigators are putting all of their attention on Adam, asking themselves things like, okay, where was he the last couple of days? Does he look like he's been hiding something? So these detectives decide to use their computers and special technology tools to follow everywhere Adam has gone for the past week. They're tracking his cell phone data, his GPS data from his car, surveillance footage along the routes. I mean, they're going all in. And you know what? It was all worth it because it led them straight to South Boston, Virginia, a town that's about 30 miles away from where Laura lives. And so detectives drive out there with a bunch of other officers and they start searching this super wooded area right next to some back road. And unfortunately, but fortunately, they found Laura's remains thrown on the dirt ground. It was as if her presence on this earth meant nothing, as if her family wouldn't have cared, as if people wouldn't have noticed her missing. Oh my God, that just breaks my heart. So the forensics team transfer her remains to the lab, and of course, they test it. For one, they had to make sure it was her, and it was. But for two, investigators wanted to see if the blood that they found inside of Adam's truck and inside the house would match Laura's DNA. And after hours, probably days of waiting, they find that the blood inside of the house and the car did in fact match Laura. And so with all of this evidence, police finally had enough to arrest this sicko. And that's exactly what they did. But 2 years later, so as of today, Adam Hughes is still awaiting trial and has not been found guilty of Laura's murder. So my question is, can her name be yelled loud enough to make sure that this evil monster stays locked up? Or is this gonna be another case of a woman silenced by domestic violence and never brought to justice?
This right here is one of the scariest and most disturbing jinn stories you will ever hear. It all started when a guy got accepted to college. Obviously he was really happy, but you see, he wanted a new independent life. So, as soon as he got accepted, he immediately decided to rent an old apartment that wasn't very far from the college he'll be going to. Now, college finally started and the guy was doing, just fine. He was trying to catch up a little bit, but that's life. And speaking of the apartment, yes, it's so old from the outside, but the inside was so clean, okay? So the guy was like, okay, I'm actually living a decent life. No. Because after just 2 weeks of him living in that apartment, he started noticing something strange. Strange thing that the guy noticed was the fact that his bedroom door never stayed closed. And if you're like, bro, he can just close it, well, no, that's not what happened. See, every time that the guy closes the door and then go to sleep, the next day he will find it completely open. Even tried to put a table in front of the door so it can't be open, but no, the next day, same thing. The table was pushed and the door was open. Oh, this was really weird. Even the guy couldn't explain what was happening and started questioning himself. It was like, okay, you know what? Today I'm not sleeping and I will see what happens. You gotta admit it, the guy got balls. So the night finally came. The guy sat on his bed and without turning the lights off, he kept staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. He kept staring at that door, not doing anything for the night, not sleeping, just staring at that door, but nothing happened. He almost gave up until he heard it again. He heard the noise coming from behind that door, and then suddenly the doorknob turned slightly downward, as if somebody's trying to open the door without making noise. This is where the guy got so scared to the point where he couldn't do anything. He just froze and then kept watching. Somebody, for some reason, is clearly trying to open that door because the doorknob kept moving up and down. The guy in his room is so cooked. This right here might be his last day. So, without nothing he can do, he was so desperate, and then he started praying for all of this to stop. He kept praying in the corner of his room until suddenly everything stopped. So the guy was like, oh my God, my prayers have been answered. What the hell? No, it only stopped for a while because something even scarier happened. The doorknob stopped moving. He saw a shadow beneath the door, the gap. And that shadow basically said, you didn't thank us today. You didn't thank us today. It was a clear, small sentence, but it echoed all over the room and it got the guy so confused. And after that, everything stopped. The noise, the doorknob, everything. But the guy couldn't sleep anyways. There's no way he's sleeping after what happened. He waited till the sunrise and then he immediately rushed to talk to one of his neighbors. He came across of one of his neighbors who was an old man, and then he told him about everything that happened last night. This is where the old man responded with something shocking that will change the whole story. He basically said, it's been 7 years that nobody lived in that apartment. This is where the guy interrupted him by saying, nah bro, you're just wrong. The apartment looks so clean, looks like somebody left it yesterday. How come? This is where the old man said something again. He said, boy, don't interrupt me, let me finish. Everybody here knows that a jinn lives in that apartment. That's why he found the apartment for so cheap. But hey, don't worry. All you gotta do is thank him from time to time and you will be alright, okay? He just wants to be, he just wants to feel seen and appreciated. Obviously, the guy didn't want to stay here anymore. He doesn't want to thank nobody, especially a jinn, and he decided to leave as soon as he could. Yet, if I was him, I would have dropped college too, because what if he catches me there? And I better not see somebody in the comments saying, oh, I low-key feel bad for the jinn. Just saying. And for those who don't know, I also got a Twitch channel and a YouTube channel. I'll be more consistent there, so if you want to see me more, you better go there. I have them on my bio. The TikTok bio, you'll see a link, click on it, and you have every social media. See you next time.
This is actually from Leeds. I used to rent a flat in Leeds, one of those tall Victorian terraces that had been hacked into student housing decades ago. From the outside, it looked almost grand. Tall windows, soot-stained brick, an iron railing out front. But inside, it was the usual patchwork, paper-thin walls, carpets that smelled faintly of damp, and floorboards that shrieked if you so much as shifted your weight. It wasn't perfect, but it was cheap. And when you're a student, cheap is king. At first, it was just an old house. Drafty, yes. Moody plumbing, sure, but nothing I couldn't live with. Until winter set in. That's when I started waking up. Always around 3 in the morning, I'd sit bolt upright, heart pounding, like certain I'd heard something. It was always the same sound, the floorboards in the hallway, creaking. Now, in a house that's that old, creaks aren't unusual. This wasn't the random groan of timber. This was rhythmic, steady, like footsteps, slow and deliberate, creeping closer. I asked my housemates, half expecting them to laugh and confess they were sneaking around, but they swore they were asleep. And every morning, without fail, the locks were bolted from the inside so no one had gone out, no one had come in. Weeks passed and the pattern didn't break. I'd wake up at 3, hear the creak, then silence. Some nights it stopped halfway down the hall. Others, it came right up to my bedroom door. I started leaving the lamp on at night, but it didn't help. The light only made the shadows under the door sharper. And that's where I began to notice them. The shadows of feet. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks, but no, they were there. Still. Waiting. The weight of something pressed close to the other side of the door. I never opened it. One night, I decided to be brave. Or stupid. I sat up in bed, covers pulled tight, and I waited. Sure enough, at 3 o'clock, the boards began to complain. Pause. Closer and closer until they stopped right outside. I fixed my eyes on the thin gap beneath the door, that faint strip of light where shadows betray what stands beyond. The feet were there, just as I'd seen before, 2 solid shapes, motionless. But then, something happened that froze the blood in my veins. The shadows changed. Instead of walking away, they lowered. Slowly, deliberately.
Oh no.
They dropped down until the dark shapes stretched flat against the floor. Whoever or whatever was outside my door wasn't standing anymore. It was lying there, listening. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think I even blinked. I just sat there locked in a staring contest with the space under the door, waiting for the shadow to move again. Eventually, the first pale light of dawn crept in and the hallway was empty. After that, I stopped pretending. I slept in the library some nights. I started carrying my keys everywhere, even inside the flat, and still, the footsteps came. Sometimes faint, sometimes heavy, always around 3. Always stopping at my door. When my lease finally ended, I almost didn't bother mentioning it to the landlord, but at the last minute I did, half a joke, half a confession. He didn't laugh. "Which room were you in?" he asked. When I told him, his face tightened. He explained that before the partitions, the whole house had been one unit. Back in the 1950s, a man who lived there had been found dead in the hallway.
Oh no.
Stretched out, flat, face down, right outside what later became my bedroom door. They never figured out why he was lying there or what he'd been doing in those final moments. I moved on, different city, different life. But even now, years later, if I wake in the small hours, I hold my breath and listen. Because sometimes in the silence, I swear I hear it again. The slow creak of footsteps, the pause outside the door, and then that dreadful shifting sound as something lowers itself to the floor.
And this is why not everyone is your friend. Storytime. This story was sent in by Shiva from Malaysia, and it happened when she was 16 in 2017. So back then, her parents were facing serious financial issues that they couldn't find a solution to, so they confided with their friend, and their friend suggested visiting a shaman. He directed the whole family to this Hindu temple in Rawang. She can't really remember the exact location of the temple, but it's like any other typical Hindu temple with a very well-known god statue in it. They started visiting the temple every Saturday. So one night, her parents left her and her brothers home alone, saying that they have to perform a ritual and would be coming home late. She found it suspicious, but she just brushed it off. About a week after the ritual, her parents' financial situation began to improve, but strange things began happening at home. The washing machine started breaking down, and then the fridge started breaking down, and then 2 weeks later, the TV also broke down. Initially, she didn't really connect it to anything supernatural, but then her house started to be infested with a lot of dead bugs and cockroaches. Meanwhile, at her parents' restaurant, the roof started leaking when it rained, and the whole restaurant was really flooded. At home, things were getting worse. Even though the lights were on, the house still feels very dark, and then there was this lingering smell of death. Now, she's someone who's very hygienic and keeps the place clean and tidy, so it's definitely not coming from her. She's someone who has been sleeping since she was a kid, but during that time, she couldn't sleep well because she felt like someone was constantly watching her every night, so eventually she decided to sleep in the living room. And then things got even worse. She developed a terrible high fever, and her brother started having appendix issues. Her religious grandma started to suspect that whatever is happening is spiritual in nature, so she gave her a protection bracelet, and strangely enough, she started feeling healthier. Then one night when she was using her phone in the living room, she saw a shadow darted into her parents' bedroom. And then she saw that thing peeking at her from behind a pillar. It was a black figure with horns and long hair brushing the floor. And suddenly the protective bracelet that she had broke off. She panicked and ran into her parents' room and showed them the broken bracelet. Lucky for her, her mom believed her and called a shaman. Then a few days later, the shaman came and examined the house. The lady said that her house is attracting all these negative entities and they are outside waiting at their gate. She said that the leader was hiding in her brother's room. Then she wasted no time and started blessing the house with mantras and angrily commanded the jinn to leave. She asked the jinn who sent you here, and the jinn said that it was ordered by the dad's friend to destroy the health, wealth and happiness of that family. The shaman also said that there was another jinn at the restaurant causing misfortune there, so she blessed both places. Once that was done, later that night, the cousins came over and asked what that ritual that was done the other day was about. So Shiva's parents explained that they had gone to a graveyard, collected sand with their bare hands, and offered a drop of blood at the temple. After hearing all of that, the grandma told them that it was actually not a holy ritual, but instead a demonic pact. And that was why she fell ill, the brother ended up in a hospital, and the whole house fell into darkness. And the shocking part of it all was realizing that it was the dad's own friend that had caused it with black magic. So the moral of the story here is not everybody wishes you well, and that you should know what you're getting yourself into. Now, if you guys have a story to share, drop them a link in bio and I'll check them out.
Let me tell you guys a story time of the lady who got married into a family that practices witchcraft. So there was this girl, whatever, who had a really bright future. She was very smart in high school, whatever. And then she started dating this older guy. You know, she was done with high school at the time. She was probably like 21. And this guy was like 31, 32. But he was a guy that was from the city. And he was a rich guy. Like, he had money, whatever. So he would travel to and fro the city to go see her, whatever. He would buy her stuff, whatever. And then one day he was like, girl, I want to get married, whatever. And she was like, sure. This guy's aunt stayed in the same village as the girl, but his mom stayed in another village, right? She didn't really know much about the mom. She just knew that this guy has a mom somewhere in the world or whatever, and she was just cool with it. Guy decides, hey, I want to get married to you, and obviously the family is happy because guy is moneyed. Girl gets married, wedding is a beautiful whatever, and she goes to stay in the village. You know when something looks good on paper? She went to go stay in the village with this guy's mom. You know when you get married and they say if the guy's family practices witchcraft, you do it too. If they have customs that they do, you do those customs too. This family took that in the literal sense. How I know the story was that my grandmother was talking to this girl's mother, and she was telling her the hardships that this girl faced. Baby girl obviously was lied to and told that she was going to be a city wife, whatever. She was going to further her studies, whatever, and none of that happened. Instead, she got married and they lived in the village with this guy's mom. Mind you, this guy has another wife, first wife, whom he stays with in the Kasi, in Joburg. And the wife is obviously a slay queen or whatever. You know, he had one girl for the ceremonies, the one who goes around and works hard as hell. And then he had a pretty girl who did absolutely nothing and just was pretty and looked good or whatever. So apparently she was basically staying in a one room alone or whatever. Whenever the husband would come with his slay queen wife from Gauteng, she would be basically named the maid. So basically her mother-in-law would be like, oh no, that's the maid or whatever. And this guy never, not once, treated her like a wife. As soon as they got married, man's disappeared. The only reason why this guy married this girl is that they basically wanted to use her. So she basically was used to help this guy maintain his wealth. She would go out at night and look for men in clubs, young, old, whatever. She sleeps with you, she takes your luck, they take your spirit, they take your soul, they trap it in a cage alongside your blessings, but your blessings obviously go to this man. Every single time she sleeps with someone that's wealthy, or someone that is smart, someone that knows how to work with their hands, the husband would come back and sleep with her. Basically, she took your luck, the husband comes, takes the luck from you and goes about his business. And apparently, if, say for example, you're someone that's good with your hands, like you use your hands to make money, she sleeps with you, she takes that skill from you, whatever blessing was given to you on your hands, she takes it. And allegedly, I'm not sure about this one, but she says whenever she slept with someone like that, that person would either get an accident where they can't use their hands, or you just lose passion for whatever that you're doing. Fortunately for her, she got saved because somebody that stays in the same village where she was staying also had family where her mom stayed, if that makes sense. And he or she, I don't know who told them, but they told them and were like, hey, like, your child is suffering. Okay, whatever you guys think is happening in that family is not right. Like, she's thin, like it's just not nice, you know. And for some reason, when I told her let's go visit your family, she was like, no, she didn't want to. And so her mom was like, yeah, no, like, it's crazy because ever since she got married, like, we don't really talk as much, and whenever we tell her to come visit, she'll tell you, yeah, she'll come, and then she doesn't show up. So the person takes the envelope where the girl stays, and when they get there, whatever, they're talking to her, but she just doesn't seem like the same person anymore. They talk to her, whatever, they tell her she should come visit at their homestead, and she's like, yeah. But obviously the mother-in-law refuses. Like, no, why does she have to come visit you guys? Isn't you see that she is our wife now? Like, we have to decide when she comes to visit. And the mom was like, yeah, I understand that, but can we just at least, like, see her? You know, just for a week. Like, why are you speaking for her? Because she agrees. He's like, yeah, you know what, it's fine, she'll come next week. Obviously they left with hope that, you know, she's going to come back and visit them. Unfortunately for them, she didn't come, as per usual. The mom eventually had to go there and fight. Tell them, my daughter's leaving with me. If you guys don't want, we're calling the cops. And the mother-in-law looked at the girl like, are you leaving with your family? And she was like, yeah. And then the mother-in-law was like, if you leave with your family, then you have to take your stuff and leave. And she was like, okay, fair day. They went back home, whatever. And basically the daughter tells them that she was unable to leave that homestead unless someone from her family can release her. If, like, so for example, she can't leave on her own, somebody has to come fetch her so that they can take her home, because if she gets on a taxi on her own and decides to go back home, she was going to lose her mind and go back to that family. So basically this family had tied her to them because they were using her for witchcraft. She went back to her home, whatever, and she told the story, and it was just sad. And honestly, ever since she got married into that family, she has never been the same. Like, the things that she says don't make sense. She's such a smart girl, but you know, when her parents think of like taking her to school or whatever, it's just like, are you really sure you want to take this kind of person to school? Because you can tell that she's smart by the things that she says, but she's just unwell. She's not sane. And also, after she left and went back to her homestead, obviously the guy that she was married to, even though they never separated, they never divorced, nothing, decided he's going to do this to another girl. And this time they got smarter. How they got smarter is that they basically went and married off a girl, and the girl stays in the village with the mother-in-law, but to make the family not think that anything is wrong, they keep giving the girl's family money. So even if she were to tell them that, like, it's hard here, I don't like it here, they'll be like, hey, a woman's job is to persevere in marriage. And it's so sad, man, because this guy is really not a good person. Him and his mom, like, guys, can't you get a snake or something?
I've been a follower for some time now, and I love playing your videos to watch and listen to while I'm doing work in my office. I have so many spooky stories and encounters, but today I'll focus on the one that affected the whole family. For context, I'll be referring to my sister as Kay for privacy reasons. Also, all the women in my immediate family are practicing witches and see people who have passed on from the physical realm. The year is 2017 and I'm in my junior year of high school. My sister Kay is in 8th grade. Over the past summer, so 2016, Kay had a few friends stay the night at our house for her birthday. After her birthday, a new shadow person had begun to make itself known. As I wrote earlier, all the girls in my family see ghosts. This was just the newest one to show up. This shadowy figure seemed to be extremely shy, as every time I would see it in our hallway that would lead to mine and my siblings' room, it would disappear. This went on for months. Shy? In January, it started to stay in the hallway when I would see it, only disappearing after I would get up from the couch or wherever I was sitting. Around the same time, my sister started getting what we thought was allergies or just a cold. Around Easter time, my sister started getting sicker and sicker, but no one could figure out what she had and no medicine was working. So we moved her to my bedroom so I could keep an eye on her. One night, while I was getting ready for bed and I just opened the door to the bathroom, the shadow figure was in the hallway, but since it would disappear when I would move, I just ignored it and turned to walk into my room. However, I guess it didn't like that, as the next thing I knew, it pounced on me and dragged me to the floor. I don't think it was shy at all. I just think that it was trying to be sneaky and it wasn't very good at it, so it could do some fuck shit like that. I screamed and it disappeared as soon as my mom opened her bedroom door. I told her what had happened and she asked me why I hadn't told her about the shadow before. Yeah, girl, why not? I just figured it was another addition to our spooky family. Don't you think that your mom would want to know who the new addition was? You know what I mean? The next morning, my mother took me outside, saged myself and her, and we went on about our day. That was the last time we saw the figure. Life moved on and we sort of forgot about it. Kay, however, kept getting sicker. One night, I woke up at around 3 a.m. I rolled out of bed to head to the bathroom. Kay and I shared a bunk bed, and I had formed the habit of checking on her every time I woke up. So I did just that. I stood up and looked at her bed, and then I saw the shadow figure, except it wasn't a figure anymore. It was gray, the skin was so tight around it that I could see its bones, it had sharp yellow teeth, and its eyes were pitch black. Yeez! What scared me the most wasn't what it looked like. What terrified me was that it was sitting on Kay's chest, staring at her. All of that is terrifying. I stayed there frozen for what seemed like an eternity before I finally mustered the courage and screamed, "Get off my sister." My mother and stepfather came bursting in the room just as whatever this thing was turned its head towards me and smiled before disappearing. Bitch, don't look at me. Don't smile at me. We contacted a very close family member who is a shaman. She came and performed a cleansing ritual on my sister and the house and did so for months. This thing fought hard to stay in the house, but we finally got it out after we confronted Kay. She finally told us that over the previous summer, her and a few of her friends took my locked spirit board and played with it. When are we gonna learn? They wanted to contact our father, but they made so many mistakes. Doesn't everybody? Literally everybody? The first being that they played with the spirit board without knowing how to close it. The second, that they didn't close it properly or cleanse it. The most important mistake was that they played with my board in a graveyard. You have got to be fucking kidding me. You're joking. These children are brave, okay? Because what? Ugh. Our home resides on a property that houses many people that have passed on, most recently being our father. They thought that they had contacted him, but they were so wrong. Isn't that literally always the case? Don't people always assume that they're talking to somebody and it turns out to be a fucking demon or something. I mean, Kay learned from my mother and her family friend why she would never be allowed to touch magic until she learned to respect it, and has done so much to prove that she can be trusted with practicing. We're very proud of how seriously she took this lesson. Well, I mean, how could she fucking not? That's scary as shit, bro. This story seems impossible to believe, and trust me, if it hadn't been something my family lived through, I wouldn't have believed it either. But it's real, and it happened. As I said, this is just one of the many things that I've encountered in my life. Let me know if you want to hear more. I don't know why y'all say that at the end of every story, because you know what the answer is. We'll all tell you yes every time. Send them all in. Anyway, what the fuck? That's scary as shit. Rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being really scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you don't want to rate it, then you don't have to. Give us your 2 cents in the comments, or don't. You know, that's your prerogative. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I will see y'all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
1967. There was this man named Francisco Pierre. He was a farmer who moved here to America to start a better life. Now, one day he was in his home and it started to get dark. He started to hear this humming sound, and it got louder and louder. And so he looks out his window, and off in the distance, he can see one of his barns. It is ablaze. It is on fire. So he gets his boots on. He runs out of the house, and he gets to the barn immediately. But he's shocked because when he gets to this barn, it is completely all right. There is no fire. There's no damage. There's no flames. But he knows that he's seen this with his own eyes. That's when he proceeds to look off to the left into one of his fields. And he sees this large triangular shaped craft has landed. And out of this craft comes down a door. And down this door proceeds 3 beings who he described as being these 6-foot-tall giant turkeys with large red eyes. And he said these things approached him, and they began to communicate with him telepathically. They said, "Do not be afraid, we mean you no harm." And that wasn't his last encounter with these things. For years, he would see these things on his property, in his fields. So one night, one of his dogs was taken by these things. Another night, they tried to take his son. And the creepiest thing was, one night, he was asleep in bed, and he awakes to these 3 6-foot-tall turkey beings in his room. And he said the next thing he remembers, he was dragged out of his bedroom, and he awakes the next day in one of his fields. And it wasn't until he meets this ufologist who comes to his house and actually documents some of these sightings and sees with his own eyes these 6-foot-tall giant turkeys.
Let's read some more scary stories that were sent to us. In all the houses I've lived in, strange things have always happened. Around 4 years ago, me and my family moved into a new house. It was normal at first, but shortly after, strange things started happening. My sisters and I would see things from the corner of our eyes, and every night we would hear someone or something moving up and down the stairs from exactly 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. One day, my friend came over and I was upstairs when suddenly she burst into my room and proceeded to tell me that she saw me behind her, staring at her, but when she turned around, I was gone. But I was in my room the entire time. I didn't think much of it until a few weeks later when I went into my mom's office. The lights flickered on, but when they flickered off, I saw a woman crawling towards me on the ground who looked exactly like me, but dead. I slammed the door shut and ran to my room. 2 days later, I walked past the stairs toward the kitchen, and there she was on my stairs, laying upside down staring at me. Again, she looked exactly like me. I blinked and she was gone. That exact night, the power went out, and the next morning my sister came to me and asked if I was in her room, and I said no. She said she woke up in the middle of the night and saw me on my knees at the end of her bed, laying face down. She touched what she thought was me, and it was ice cold, and she called my name because she thought it was me, but whatever it was didn't answer. She ignored it. We became scared and told my parents, but they didn't believe us. For a few months, I didn't see her until I broke up with my long-term boyfriend, and before he left, he said, "I saw her standing behind you." And that day, I didn't feel anything towards him, and it was like I didn't have any emotions for him, which is strange because I loved him deeply. I haven't seen her since. Okay, she also said that this guy that she was dating was hurting her for a couple of years, and she didn't have the guts to leave him. So we both think that maybe whatever this spirit was in her house, maybe was trying to warn her to get away from that guy, or like give her the strength to get away from that guy or something. Or maybe she scared him away somehow. I don't know. But I think that spirit in her house had something to do with them breaking up. When I was 9, I was at my grandpa's house. It was summer, but the air was pretty cool that day, so I went for a ride on my bike. I loved doing that. My grandpa lived in a pretty small village. When I rode around the pond in the village, I saw a woman from afar. I stopped and squinted my eyes to see her better. Once I did, I saw she had pale, dirty skin, like she had crawled out of a grave. She was wearing a black, worn-down dress and no shoes. I couldn't make out her face before my heart started racing and I took off on my bike. I was racing up a steep hill just to get away. Once I got back to my grandpa's house, I ran in and told my sisters, who believed me. Later, my aunt who lived with my grandpa told me about an unaliving that took place in that village about 30 years ago. A woman was unalived there and her body was never found. That's really sad that whoever was unalived there, her body was never found. And it's sad to know that like her spirit is just still lingering around that village. Maybe someday someone will find her body and then she can go to the other side. Let's read some more scary stories that were sent to us. This story happened 4 years ago to my sister and her husband, and it happened in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. So one night, they couldn't sleep, so they went on a drive. They were driving down back roads just talking and looking for animals, and they drove over a levee. After the levee, there was the woods. And at the tree closest to the road, they had just happened to both look over on the passenger side, and they saw something. It was a long, skinny hand and half of a face looking at them. Then it slid back behind the tree. They both instantly got a weird feeling. My sister said she teared up a little. They both looked at each other, didn't say a word, and drove fast the whole way home. They didn't sleep that night, and they didn't tell anyone or even talk about it for 3 years. I think we all know what that was, okay? That's what we call around here a skiggly wiggly, if you know what I'm saying. I have 11 siblings, so including my parents, 14 of us went on holiday to the coast one year. We all shared a house, and I was 8 at the time. When we got to the house, there were snakes on the roof. The neighbors let them up there to sunbathe, and we just thought, all right, moving forward. There was a big room that my sister and I wanted to share, but 3 of my brothers got it. That night, my youngest brother who got the room stood up in his sleep and started speaking to the wall, yelling, go away, I want to go home, go away." Then he just laid down and continued sleeping. A couple days later, one of my older brothers was downstairs alone with his dog when his dog started barking at the locked door. He was home alone. The door handle started jiggling as if someone were trying to open it from the other side. His dog continued barking and my brother was terrified. Every night at this house, we all heard doors opening and closing on their own and footsteps. My sister also got really sick randomly. My sister also swears she saw a dead person just sitting in a car when we were down there. Once we went home and got away from that house, everything returned to normal. We all still remember this and swear this house was haunted. And that happened in Australia.
Something eerie about the snow. You know, a lot of strange things happen during snowstorms. A lot of people have supernatural occurrences. Now, there was this woman named Elizabeth. Elizabeth said her grandmother lived in eastern Tennessee in a small little holler. And she had lived in the same house for 40 plus years. About 6 months before this story, she said her grandfather had passed away. And her grandmother Rose happened to be home alone in her house one night. And this particular night, there was a really bad snowstorm. Her grandmother couldn't sleep, so she was sitting by the window drinking hot chocolate and watching the snowfall. At about midnight, she hears the clock go off. Doom, doom, doom. And then she hears a knock at the door. And she thinks to herself, who could be here this late at night? So she makes her way to the front door. And as she slowly opens it, she is shocked to see her husband, Edgar, is standing there. And she thinks to herself, how in the world can this be? Edgar has passed away 6 months ago. So she says, Edgar, what are you doing here? Like, what is going on? And she said, Edgar looked at her and said, everything is okay. Don't worry, Rose. She goes, no, Edgar, you're not supposed to be here. Like, you are not real. He says, no, I am real. And that's when she looked at his skin. It was kind of shiny and it looked very rubbery. And it looked as if he was wearing some kind of mask and his skin was hanging off his face. And it felt like her husband, but at the same time, she knew it wasn't Edgar. So she said, Edgar, you must leave. You are no longer here. Like, you have to go. And he goes, no, Rose, it's okay. Just let me inside. And she said there was this strange, shrill sounding thing in his voice. He didn't sound right. And she said that's when he tried to make a move to go.
Have you heard of the White Witch at Rose Hill Cemetery? Weird Spooky Antioch, California. In the late 1800s, this quiet hillside was anything but peaceful. The Black Diamond mines used to fill these hills with life and unalivings. Between 1850 and 1906, over 300 million tons of coal was pulled out of these mines. Towns of Somersville and Nortonville thrived until the mines dried up. When the miners left, the ghosts didn't. More than 200 people were buried on this hill. Many of them children lost to scarlet fever, smallpox, and typhoid. Over time, the gravestones were forgotten, headstones were stolen, and the cemetery left to ruin. But one grave still draws visitors, and maybe something more. Her name was Sarah Norton, a midwife who delivered more than 600 babies and never lost one. On October 5th of 1879, she was rushing through a storm to deliver another baby when her buggy overturned. Her horses bolted and Sarah was overthrown, unalived instantly. She was never a religious woman and once even told a friend that she didn't want a funeral. But the townspeople didn't listen. They tried to hold one anyway, and that's when the storms came. Every time the funeral was planned, violent storms and thunder would force it to be postponed, until finally they buried her without a ceremony beneath a dark and angry sky. Since then, visitors of the cemetery have said they have seen a woman drifting through the fog. Others hear the creak of a wagon wheel, the cry of a horse, or even see the outline of a ghostly hearse, climbing the dirt road that leads to her grave. Locals say she still wanders these hills, the midwife who never stopped watching over the children. So if you ever find yourself near the Black Diamond mines, and the wind starts to rise, don't look too closely at the white figures in the distance, because Sarah Norton, the White Witch of Rose Hill Cemetery, might still be delivering one final message. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been to this cemetery or if you caught a glimpse of Sarah Norton.
Hi Daisy, my name is Alan, and I'd like to share with you my scary story. I've been working as a server for my mom's catering business for a couple of years now, and I've experienced some paranormal activity while I'm at work. So, the story took place at a small venue located in a small town outside of my city. Some of the venues we work at are old and have a lot of history, and this house was one of them. When I first got there, the moment I stepped in the house, I got an uncomfortable feeling. I brushed it off and went back to work. We started to unload the stuff that we brought, and we put it all in the kitchen. When I put some of our boxes on the kitchen counter, with the corner of my eye, I could see somebody run across the hallway that was by the kitchen. A couple of hours went by, and I was taking a break with the other workers. We were talking to the owners of the venue when they had told us that in the 1900s, a man escaped from a nearby prison and hid in the house. The owners at the time were away, and the man hid in a big wooden box on the 3rd floor. Unfortunately, he was locked in there and he died. The owners said that sometimes they would hear banging in the 3rd floor where the man died, as if someone was trying to escape from a box. Just to clarify, the box he died in isn't in the house anymore. After they told us that scary story, they told us that the spirit of the man who died there likes to play tricks on the catering staff that come and work at the venue. They said that most of the time, the staff complain that they keep seeing figures with the corner of their eyes. Then I remembered my experience in the kitchen earlier. I didn't tell anyone, because I didn't think anyone would believe me. My name is Vanessa. I recently started watching your videos and wanted to share some of my own experiences. I work as a registered nurse and travel to different facilities for work. On this particular day, I was working at a facility I had only visited maybe twice before. It was a really old building. It even had a dumbwaiter that went from the 1st floor to the 2nd floor. The 1st floor is mostly used for storage and administrative offices, while the 2nd floor is where the nursing stations are and the patients' rooms. No one ever really goes to the 1st floor, and I had never been there before that night. It was about 10:30 p.m., and I was getting ready for a shift change soon, so I started stocking up on supplies and getting things in order. Then, I noticed that I needed a special liquid feeding for a patient, but I couldn't find any in our station. So, I went to the other nurse's station where 3 other staff members were sitting. I asked them where I could find the specific feeding I was looking for. They all exchanged looks and hesitated before one of them said, "They're downstairs on the 1st floor." Since I wasn't familiar with the layout of the facility, I asked if someone could accompany me or provide directions. However, they nervously laughed and replied, "Oh no, we're not going down there." They proceeded to tell me that the facility was haunted, with the activity being particularly intense on the 1st floor, so they always avoided going there. Despite their warnings, I didn't really believe them, so I asked again if they could just tell me how to get there. This facility was a psych facility, so everything was locked. They gave me the key and told me which way to go. Then, one of them said, "Hold on, let's tell Miguel to go with her." Miguel was the only male nurse on staff, so they thought it was appropriate for him to accompany me. They paged Miguel to the station. When he arrived, they told him, all laughing, "Hey Miguel, she needs to go downstairs. Go with her." He became nervous and started shaking his head no. saying he did not want to go. Feeling a bit annoyed, I said, "Forget it, I'll just go by myself." I started walking towards the door that led downstairs, but then Miguel said, "Okay, fine, I'll go with you. I can't let you go by yourself." After he said that, I did start to get nervous. Why was he so scared? Maybe this place was haunted. So, we walked to the door and unlocked it, which led downstairs. There was a staircase, a very wide staircase with old wood. The first floor was underground, so it wasn't very bright down there, even though the lights were on. When we got to the bottom of the stairs, we walked about 20 feet. The other nurse was a few feet in front of me when I suddenly felt scared and stopped. I turned to the right and just froze. At the same time, the nurse also stopped. We both asked each other, "Did you feel that?" He said he felt cold, with chills on the back of his neck. I felt the same way. I said, "Forget this," and started to walk back towards the stairs when I heard him say, "Vanessa, look, it's a little girl." He kept repeating that there was a little girl there, saying she was wearing a veil halfway down her face. I didn't turn to look. I just started walking quickly towards the stairs. When I reached the stairs, I began to almost run up them. This story takes place in our current home. My family and I moved from an old historic house, which was sometimes creepy, to a newer home built in 2018 in the same town. My parents don't believe in the supernatural, but my sisters and I have always found it interesting. One night, my parents were out, and my two sisters and I were home alone. We had been watching cable TV, and were about to head to bed, when we suddenly heard keys in the back door. We thought our parents had come home, and we just hadn't heard their car. We heard the back door swing open and close, followed by the sounds of keys being sat down on the dining room table. I went to the dining room to say hi, but no one was there. My sisters and I checked the back door, and it was still locked, with the deadbolt secured. No one was home. Their car wasn't in the driveway, and our parents were still far away. I remember being so scared that all of us slept in my room that night. But it didn't stop there. As we were about to fall asleep, we heard it again. The sound of keys in the door swinging open, and keys being sat down. This time, we grabbed whatever we could find for self-defense and went to check. But again, no one was there. Not even a minute later, a vehicle pulled into the driveway. It was finally our parents. When I tell you we were spooked, we were terrified. Fast forward a few years later. I was homesick with the stomach flu. I was in the bathroom, brushing my teeth, when I suddenly heard the back door open and the sound of keys being placed on the table. I thought my dad had come to check on me, but when I looked, his truck wasn't there, and he texted me saying he was still at work. Even now, my sisters and I sometimes get weird vibes in certain rooms. There are times when we feel too scared to even turn on the lights. One night, I was home alone around 10 p.m., heading to the kitchen to make popcorn, when I heard shuffling, and something dropped in my sister's room. I froze, but quickly, I rushed back to the couch. Even my cat became more alert than I had ever seen him. I was so scared I started crying, desperately wishing for everyone to come home. Now I just pray, keep crosses around the house, and try to bring as much positive energy as I can.
This is probably the scariest story that I've heard in a really long time, and trust me, I have heard my share of scary stories. For the sake of the story, let's call her Melanie. If you see her name tagged down there, it's because she decided to get tagged. I'm not sure if she wants that yet. Melanie was about 22 years old. She was going to school in a different state. Around the time she got very deep into the spiritual world, so did her friends. One day they happened to be at a thrift store when they came across a board game called The Mystic Eye. It had a pendulum very similar to the Ouija board. At the time, they didn't really think much of it. They took it home and started playing with it and asking it like your basic questions, but the board was getting all the answers wrong, so they really thought that it just didn't work, and they just kind of tossed it to the side. After her friends left, mind you, Melanie lived on her own. Her apartment always felt like it had a heavy presence already on its own, so she didn't want to play with this board by herself, even though like she felt like the board didn't work in the first place anyways. But for whatever reason, she felt extremely drawn to the board. It was almost like something was like forcing her to play with it. When Melanie tried the board game again by herself, it worked. Like the pendulum was moving like extremely hard. She was asking the board a bunch of personal questions, and the board knew the answers every single time. At the time, Melanie had a crush on this guy. Let's call him Chris. She had a really big crush on this guy, Chris, and she asked the board when would she be sleeping with him, or would she be sleeping with him anytime soon, and the board answered with the number 4. Melanie then asked 4 months, 4 days, 4 years. The board said 4 days. So apparently, according to the board, she was going to be sleeping with Chris in about 4 days. Then Melanie decided to ask the board what she was talking to, if it was like a good spirit or a bad spirit, and the board responded with a bad spirit. Then Melanie asked if it was a D word, and the board said yes. Then she asked what was the name of the D word, and the board spelled it out. I'll put it right here. I'm not about to say this name out loud. Melanie did some research and found out that he's a legit D word. He's legit. After this, she decided to stop playing the game. She called her mom, who had a friend that was extremely spiritual. She told her mom's friend the whole situation. Her friend told her, or her mom's friend told her, to go ahead and burn the board. Make sure that the board was complete ashes, to put Bibles around her house, to have crosses in her house. So this was serious, that this D word was intense. Now I'm going to read this next part because it gets very intense. So after Melanie went ahead and burned the board and put the Bibles and crosses everywhere, the energy in her apartment got extremely heavy. She sunk into this deep depression. She felt like she was being watched constantly. Her friends felt like they couldn't even breathe in the hallway, and some wouldn't even stay unless the lights were on. Melanie had constant nightmares, sleep paralysis. She heard her name being called when she knew that no one was there. Cleansing always made things worse. It was like she was provoking whatever was there. She barely slept and felt like it was feeding off of her. Somehow she happened to finish school and she moved away. Melanie actually did a lot of research to make sure that when she moved out of this apartment, this thing would not follow her. She actually watched a couple TikTok videos advising her of what to do, and it worked. When she moved out of the apartment, the thing did not follow her, thankfully. But one last thing, when the D word said that she would be sleeping with her crush Chris within 4 days, she didn't believe it, but it happened. Exactly 4 days later, she went ahead and actually slept with Chris. After she did some more research on, the D word, it is said that he is to cause love or attraction between a man and a woman. So that's like his biggest thing. Like he causes things to happen when it has to do like with love and attraction. So yeah, don't play with anything that you know nothing about, and don't call upon something that you know nothing about. Don't ask anything questions, because I guarantee you that you're most likely speaking to something extremely dark.
I wanted to share a story my dad told me that really freaked me out. He's from a small town in Guatemala called San Jose La Herrada, and this happened when he was about 15 years old. He came from a poor family, so to help out with money, he decided to sell silverware. It started out as a normal day. He got his silverware ready and headed out the door. He went to different houses like he normally did, but then he got to one house that looked very old, almost like no one lived there. Despite that, he knocked on the door. To his surprise, someone answered. It was an old man. He was very well dressed. He wore a dark royal blue suit, fancy black shoes, and carried a dark red cane. My dad asked him if he wanted to buy some silverware, and the old man replied, "I will buy your whole kit, but I don't have money right now. Could you come back tomorrow?" My dad was thrilled and quickly said yes. The next day, he headed straight to the house. He knocked on the front door, but no one answered. He checked again the following day, and the day after that, for a whole week, but still no answer. One day, while he was knocking, a lady happened to walk by and asked why he had been knocking on the door for so long. My dad explained that the old man who lived there had promised to buy all his silverware. The lady looked at him with a serious expression and said, That house has been vacant for 15 years. Goosebumps ran down my dad's spine. He tried to make excuses, refusing to believe what the lady had just told him. But then he remembered something that didn't sit right. The old man was dressed in luxury that you wouldn't find in a small town where my dad lived. To this day, my dad still wonders who that old man really was.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
In the 1850s and 1860s, Edwin Booth was the man. He was this extremely famous American actor who basically anywhere he went in America, people would know who he was. He was extremely recognizable, a household name, an A-list celebrity through and through. But his acting prowess and his career and his fame, those are not the things we remember him for. In early 1865, when Edwin was 31 years old and was at the height of his acting fame, he walked into a New Jersey train station and walked through the building to the actual platform where the trains are. And as soon as he turned a corner and actually saw the train that he wanted to board, he very quickly realized that he probably was not going to get on that train. There was already this huge throng of people out on the platform pressed up against the side of this train, and they're all waving their arms around and yelling. And in the middle of this big group of people with his back pressed up against the train was the train's conductor, whose job was to sell tickets in addition to driving the train. But from Edwin's perspective, it seemed fairly obvious based on the conductor's body language and what some of the people in the crowd were yelling that there just weren't enough tickets. That's why this big unruly group had formed, because all these people were rushing forward trying to buy one of the last few tickets. Now, Edwin could have very easily just walked up and announced himself and shown his very famous face, and almost certainly he would have gotten a ticket. But to this point, Edwin had not been recognized in this train station, and so he wanted to keep a low profile, and so he decided against that idea. Instead, he decided he would just kind of join this big group and, try to flag down the conductor and try to buy one of these tickets, and if he didn't, so be it. And so Edwin, instead of going to the back of this group, he went around to the right side, close up against the side of the train, and right as he got to the outside of the group and he turned in towards the group, he looked up at where the conductor was, and he saw the conductor turning around and walking back into the train. He had clearly sold all of his tickets, and so anyone who had not purchased one yet, like Edwin, they were out of luck. They'd have to wait for the next train. Edwin was about to just walk away and wait for the next train when he noticed the crowd in front of him. They didn't disperse like he was doing. Instead, they all seemed to kind of surge forward towards the train, which was now moving, and as they pushed forward as if they were going to jump onto this train, even though they didn't have tickets, one man who was towards the front of this group, right up against the train, he falls to the ground and gets trapped halfway under the train. His lower half was literally on the tracks under the train, and his upper half is now under this big crowd of people that are now trampling him. And so Edwin can see very clearly that if someone does not grab this guy and pull him out soon, he's going to get run over by the train. And so Edwin, without any hesitation, he jumps forward onto the ground, on the platform, and he reaches his hand out through the feet of all these people in this crowd, and he grabs the collar of the guy who had fallen, and he pulls him, and as he's pulling him, this guy who's on his back, he starts pushing with his legs and his feet, and within about a fraction of a second, they yank him out from under the train, and the guy who had fallen and Edwin are lying on their backs on the platform, and before they could even talk to each other, they sat up and watched as a big train wheel rolled over that piece of track where this guy had just been laying. Edwin had saved his life. The guy he had saved was a 21-year-old named Robert, and so the two of them, they stand up and they face each other for the first time, and when Robert sees Edwin, he gasps, because this is Edwin Booth, the mega celebrity. He could not believe that was the guy who had just saved him. And while Robert was very thankful, he also was just totally dumbfounded at the absurdity of the situation he was in, and so eventually Edwin just says, hey, I'm glad I was here to help you, no big deal, next time be more careful, and then at some point the men just shook hands and parted ways. Edwin would eventually get on the next train and he would go wherever it was he needed to go, and before long his very busy schedule kind of occupied his mind and he had kind of forgotten about what happened on the train platform. But a few days later, Edwin got a letter in the mail from a very high-ranking government official thanking him for saving Robert's life, because it would turn out Robert Lincoln was the eldest son of the then President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Now, to be clear, Edwin was extremely famous and had lots and lots of influence and knew lots of very important people, but he had never had any interaction with anyone in the Lincoln family before he met Robert on the train platform. So it was just a crazy coincidence that this mega celebrity happened to save the life of the president's son. But this coincidence was nothing compared to the coincidence that occurred next. On the evening of April 14th, 1865, so roughly 3 months after Edwin saved Robert, Robert's father, President Lincoln, sat down in a private seating area to watch a play at a Washington, D.C. theater. During the production, at around 10:15 p.m., a man snuck into the private seating area and shot the president to death. The killer was Edwin's younger brother, John Wilkes Booth. This assassination had nothing to do with Edwin or his interaction with Robert on the train platform. This was an assassination that was formulated and carried out completely independently, meaning it was purely coincidence that just a few months after Edwin saved a Lincoln's life, his own brother took a Lincoln's life. On May 22nd, 2021, a father and his young son were out for a walk in their small suburban town just outside of Barcelona, Spain. When they reached their downtown, they were going to turn around and walk back home, but the boy pleaded with his father to make a quick stop at the old theater. The reason the boy and many other kids in the town loved going to this old theater was because out front of it was this huge papier-mâché statue of a dinosaur, a stegosaurus to be exact. And so after a little bit of convincing, the father finally agrees and they start heading in that direction. After they turned the corner and could actually see the dinosaur statue, the boy took off running while the father just stayed back and walked leisurely, watching his son the whole time. And as he's watching his son, he can see he gets right up to the statue, and then the boy just kind of suddenly stops and stares at something on the bottom of the statue. And so the father notices his son has seen something peculiar enough to make him stop and stare, and so he yells to his son, "Hey, what do you see?" And the son just points at the back right leg of the statue. And so the father thinks this is really weird, so he jogs up to his son and he crouches down right next to him and looks in the direction his son is pointing. And at first, the father believes all his son is pointing at is this fairly obvious crack on the outside of the statue on the back right leg. And he's thinking his son has just noticed that the statue is kind of falling apart. But as he's looking at this crack that his son is pointing at, he realized his son was not pointing at the crack. He was pointing at what was behind the crack, what was inside the dinosaur statue. And when the father realized what he was looking at, he grabbed his son, stood up, and ran in the other direction and called emergency services. A few minutes later, the police and fire department show up in front of this old theater. They get out and they go up to the statue and they confirm what's inside this back right leg. Afterwards, they go to their trucks and they get out chainsaws. Eventually, they were able to carve a big enough square on this back right leg that they were able to remove the thing that the father and the son had seen originally, and that was a dead man's body. Not much is known about this dead man, except that he was a 39-year-old man who his family had reported missing a couple of days before he was actually found. While we don't know this for sure, it's believed he decided to crawl inside the statue when he realized the belly of the dinosaur was movable. Now, it's not entirely clear how he figured that out. Either the belly was already moved and he saw the opening and so saw the opportunity to crawl inside for some reason, or he was poking and prodding at the statue and discovered the belly was movable, moved it aside, and then again seized the opportunity and crawled inside. But either way, the man crawled inside the statue, and then once he was in the dinosaur, his phone slipped out of his hand or slipped out of his pocket, and then instead of falling out of the dinosaur onto the ground, it fell inside the dinosaur and slid down the inside of the statue until it fell into the bottom of the bottom right-hand leg. And so the man decides to go after his phone, and so on his belly, he slides over to the back right leg, and then he begins lowering himself head first into the leg, reaching for his phone. And so as he's kind of slowly lowering himself down, using his legs to pin himself inside the statue, he gets closer and closer, and he's almost about to grab his phone when his feet lose their grip, and he slips and falls headfirst all the way to the bottom of this back right leg. The space he was in was so tight, he was not able to turn himself around and climb up and out again. In fact, it was so tight, he could barely move. His arms were pinned by his side, and so he couldn't use them to even push himself back up and out. And because he could not bend his legs, he could not use his legs to pull himself back out again either. And so this man most likely began screaming for help, but for whatever reason, nobody heard him. And so after what must have been several agonizing days, the man finally just died. His autopsy has not been made public, so we don't know for sure what actually killed him, although one could speculate he died of either dehydration or perhaps asphyxia from being trapped in this really tight space where his chest may not have been able to expand all the way, and so he would have eventually suffocated. Following the gruesome discovery, the dinosaur statue was removed from the front of the old theater.
So something is happening to me, and I think there's something in my house, and it is absolutely terrifying, and I know I'm going to sound absolutely insane right now, and that's fine, but first of all, I need to ask you guys a question. Does anybody else see images in their head when they close their eyes? And I'm not talking about imagining the images. I'm talking about actually seeing things. Things of people doing things, just things of maybe places, destinations. This has been happening to me for a couple of years now, and I never recognize the situations that are happening. And I always wonder to myself, am I seeing like the future? But it's never been that way. I've never seen something and then it actually happened. At least I don't think. The images aren't super clear. So the scary part is, number one, I just recently started to be able to see myself doing things. And what scares me about this is you don't have a mirror in front of yourself every single day, right? So you don't know what you look like when you're doing something at all times. But I will close my eyes and I will see myself doing something that I have done before, and I'll remember that time. I didn't have a mirror in front of me at the time, so there's no way for me to know what I looked like when I was doing it, but I'll watch exactly what I was doing, even stuff that I didn't remember that will jog my memory. Okay, so last night, this part is the worst. Last night, I go to bed, I close my eyes, and I start to see myself. And I see myself putting on this red bathing suit that I put on a long time ago. I remember me putting on this red bathing suit. And normally, like I said, I see blue and white. I could see the red very clearly. And I am like thinking to myself, this is so weird. This is really starting to freak me out. When suddenly I start to see something form behind me. And it's this woman. And she has like this crinkled, crimped, crazy hair. She's very old looking, but she has wrinkles that come to like a point right here that are prominent. And she has these huge eyes, and there's black in the middle, and then they're very white on the outside. And she's starting to form behind me, and then she was just standing there staring at myself, the same self that I'm looking at myself, not looking at me. And I'm starting to freak out at this point. And then she slowly turns her head and looks right at me and just starts to smile. And the smile gets so big, and then her face starts to get closer and closer and closer to mine until I opened my eyes and just freaked out. So after this happens, I take my eye mask off and I'm sitting up in bed and I'm freaking out at this point. And I have actually been sleeping with the TV on because it's hard for me to sleep with silence because I always hear this humming sound. Those of you who know, you know. And I am just sitting there and I'm like, you have to go back to sleep. It's so late. It's so late because I'm working so much right now. So I finally just am like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back to sleep. I'm going to force myself not to have these little visions, or I'm going to try to. So I go back to sleep. I go to close my eyes, and then I just feel a boom at the end of my bed, like someone literally just boom slapped the end of my bed. Now it's become impossible for me to sleep, so I have to get up at this point because I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to sleep. So I got up and I went downstairs and I grabbed like a snack or something, and I went back upstairs. Mind you, I'm by myself and in my apartment, and I sit down on my bed, and suddenly I hear this scratching noise in my wall. It sounds like there's mice in my wall. And at a point, I'm like, is there mice in my wall? I live in Brooklyn, but I live in a fairly decent apartment. There shouldn't be mice. I've never had a problem with mice before, but I'm just hearing this, and then it's like slow. So I'm like, there's no way. No, mice don't do that. So I literally say, what the, out loud. And as soon as I said that, it stopped. I was up for another 2 hours. Nothing else happens. And I had to go to bed. So at this point, I'm like, I gotta take like melatonin or something. So I take the melatonin, I go to lay down, and I close my eyes, and I'm starting to drift off a little bit. And then I am woken up. I don't know by what, like fully woken up now. And my eyes are still closed. And suddenly I start to see two, in my eyes are closed. I see two people trying to climb on my bed, and one of them is that woman, and their arms are like going like this as they're trying to climb on my bed, but they look like they're trying to climb on my bed, but something is holding them back, like almost like there's an invisible force that is holding them back from climbing on my bed, and their arms are just going like this, and their bodies are moving like this, and they're like clawing at my bed. One was a man and one was a woman, and I was so focused on the woman because she freaks me out so much that I couldn't even tell you what the other one looked like. I just was paying, the arms were like in my peripheral. I can't say that word. And I was like, you know what? I'm not getting sleep tonight. So what do you guys think this is? Is this stress? But if it is, how am I seeing myself exactly as is without knowing what I looked like when I did what I was doing? Do you get what I'm saying? And it can't be stress because I've seen these things before. I've seen these, you guys know that I have closed my eyes and I've seen, it might be the same woman. If you guys have ever watched my stories before, I've seen a woman when I've closed my eyes before crawl underneath my mirror, and it could be the same woman, but I'm not positive, and I don't know what's going on, and I'm by myself. Does this happen to anybody else? That's what I want to know. Does anyone else see these vision things? Does this happen to anyone? Am I the only one? I know I'm not the only one because I asked you guys in a live before, and you guys have said that you've seen images when you close your eyes. But is ever this descriptive? And the creepiest part was me watching myself and then watching that person form behind me. Like, was she watching me in real life during that time? And I was just seeing what was really going on in a different realm with my eyes. When I'm like, while I'm sitting here right now, is there a woman behind me? It literally gives me chills. So please tell me what you guys think, because I am freaking out a little bit. I would love to know your thoughts. I would love to know if this has happened to you before, and I would love any suggestions. I also would just want to say to you guys, I'm giving tonight, instead of doing a specific shout out, I should do a separate video of this, and I will do a separate video of this. But my shout out tonight is to every single one of you. Want to say happy Thanksgiving, and I hope that you guys are all with your family and loved ones. I hope every single one of you is surrounded by loved ones. You guys have changed my life in so many ways. You have no idea how much I care about each and every one of you. And I'm sad or down, I look at my comment section. It will flip my whole day around. There are so many times when so many of you have changed the way that I felt about myself, the day that I was having. Bringing a horrible day to one that I just feel so much gratitude for, and it's all because of simple acts of kindness like comments. That's why it's so important to be nice to people, you guys, because you don't know what you can do for them, and the change that you have brought to my life is monumental, and I hope that you guys know that. So much support and love is poured into this page, and it truly has become one of the most important things to me in my life.
So the following video is in Spanish, and I'm just going to explain to you what is going on. It is really early in the morning, and the mom was awake, and she said that she started to hear something weird outside, so she went to wake up her son, and he started recording because they are claiming that this is La Llorona. Let me know what you guys think. That's just a rooster. I would not be outside.
My name is Bella. I've been watching your channel for a while now, and I feel it's time to share a story. I am Native American and from a small town in Arizona called Guadalupe. I've encountered a lot of paranormal things throughout my life, but one encounter in particular really changed how I see the world. Ever since I was a little girl, I've known I was different from other kids. I would see things that weren't really there, or so I thought. I often saw shadows out of the corners of my eyes or even full-on ghostly apparitions. As I grew older, I started seeing things that I was told are called tree demons. I was always warned, just ignore them and they won't bother you. Anytime I visited my mom and went outside at night, I would see demons and other strange entities. Over time, I got used to it. On one occasion, I went to visit my tia and my primos. We were playing outside as the sun was going down when all of a sudden we heard voices and whistles. As a Native American, one thing we never mess with is whistles at night. I remember walking outside when something told me to look around. That's when I saw a figure with a triangular shaped head and a very strange face. I had always been told to never let them know you see them because that could attract them to you. So I walked back inside and pretended nothing had happened. Experiences like that kept happening for a long time. I was under the impression that these entities showed themselves to me because of what happened when I was born. I had stopped breathing, and for a brief moment, it was as if I wasn't really here. By some miracle, the doctors managed to revive me and get me breathing again. Turns out though, that there was much more to it than I thought. Later in life, I had a big falling out with my mom due to some issues in the past. That's when my tia told me some disturbing truths. She explained that my mom had been practicing witchcraft and voodoo, not just on strangers, but even on my sister and me. She also mentioned they had brought someone to bless us and help remove the darkness that had been attached to us. When the person asked who had sent it, the answer revealed my mom's face. My tia explained that this was why none of my family came around my mom, because she would leave curses at their homes. When I started living with my dad, he stumbled across her altar when he went to pick us up. The altar had Santa Muerte and other items related to voodoo and dark magic. After learning about this, I officially cut off communication with her and haven't spoken to her since. Once I cut her out of my life, everything changed. I started feeling happier, and I was no longer in a depressed state. I stopped seeing strange things, and the sleep paralysis and nightmares went away. I now believe that being around her and all that negative energy had attracted darkness into my life and made me miserable. This is just one of many stories I have, and I would love to share more in the future.
Don't open your door for your neighbor. Or at least that's what the person in this story is telling us because of what the fuck happened to them. By the way, I got these earrings at Spencer's. I had no idea that they could do this. The little camera is taking pictures. How cute. So this girl says that she was fast asleep and around 3 in the morning she thought she heard somebody ring her doorbell. At first she thought it was just her imagination, but when she got up she did realize that somebody was definitely at her front door. She opened the door a little bit and realized that it was her neighbor Don Andres, and he looked really pale and his eyes were like wide open. Please let me into your house. Please let me in. In that moment she remembered all the rumors and things that people had said about her neighbor, that he was schizophrenic and that he had very severe mental issues, which is why she tells him, I can't let you in. You need to go home, okay? You need to go next door and go inside your house. She said that she felt a little bit of fear, but she responded to him in a way that was very direct and very stern. That's when her neighbor says, no, please let me in. He starts crying. He says, they're coming for me. They're coming for me. That was the moment where she looked past her neighbor and she sees this very, very dark shadow with red glowing eyes, and she got really scared. She also felt that Don Andres was trying to come into her house, and she immediately immediately closes the door and locks it. When she closes the door, she says that she was shaking, her heart was beating way too fast, and she was really scared. But it was also in that moment where behind her, in her living room, she heard the voice of a little girl. Why didn't you help him? Soon as she heard that voice, she turned around and looked at the little girl. She said that she could only describe this little girl like the girl from The Ring, where it's like this white gown with black long hair. And as she turned to look at this little girl in her living room, the little girl charged at her. As this little girl was charging at her, she was saying, "This is all your fault. He needed you. This is all your fault. He needed you." Right before this little girl got to her where she was standing by the door, she explains that no one's going to believe her, but her neighbor, Don Andres, out of nowhere just appeared right next to that little girl. He looked even worse than when he was at her front door, where he was really pale and like his eyes were sunken in. In that very moment, she said her lights started flickering and she turned around because of how scared she was, and she felt an arm on her shoulder, and that is when she just fainted. The following day, when she did manage to wake up, she went outside of her home and realized that her neighbor Don Andres had actually passed away. She did end up going to his funeral, but she said that while she was there, she was sad for his family, but she just felt this weirdest vibe, like if somebody was watching her, like she did not feel right. And that is why she says, for this very reason, do not open your door to your neighbor, because what if that isn't even your neighbor? No thank you, I am terrified now. What do you guys think? This story reminds me of Goosebumps, and you'll understand why at the end, but the story is called Family Friendly. Jimmy was fed up with Martin. Martin had been Jimmy's good friend for many years, but lately, Jimmy began to suspect that Martin was manipulating him. Whenever they associated with each other, Jimmy always felt that Martin was forcing him to feel, act, and think a certain way. When they spoke to each other, Jimmy felt like he simply had to say the things Martin wanted him to say. This went on for a long time. It got worse to the point that Jimmy felt he had absolutely no free will when Martin was around. Jimmy longed to be free to say the things to Martin that he truly wanted to say, but he never had the courage to do so until one day. Jimmy, with every ounce of willpower he had, flipped up both his middle fingers in Martin's face and shouted, "Fuck you, I'm done being manipulated by you." The adults in the audience covered their children's ears, shocked that this was supposed to be a family-friendly performance. Martin, the ventriloquist, was absolutely terrified.